Today is the 10th anniversary commemorating the Heavenly 100. These are people who died during Ukraine's Revolution of Dignity in 2014. Good afternoon, Henry Keane is here at UATV English with more hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Let us look behind the shoulder a little bit. In November 2013, Ukraine was on the verge of signing the long-awaited association agreement with the European Union. This agreement, carefully drafted since 1998 and passed through all state institutions, seemed ready for implementation. However, on November 21, 2013, just a week before the plan signing, the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine all of a sudden decided to hold the whole process. This abrupt, to say the least, move caused dissatisfaction among Ukrainians. Let's call a spade a spade. It wasn't a dissatisfaction, it was the nation was outraged. On the same day, the hashtag Euromaidan spreads all over the social media platforms, becoming a call for dissent. Then comes a Facebook post from journalist and activist Mustafa Nayem. Let's meet at 10:30 p.m. at the Independence Monument, dress warmly, bring umbrellas, tea, coffee, good mood and friends. Same evening, 1,500 protesters gathered at Independence Square in central Kyiv, including journalists, celebrities and opposition politicians. With each passing hour, the number grew, and by the evening of November 22nd, there were about 3,000 to 5,000 people. At the same time, units of Berkut, special anti-riot police, sent by Ukraine's Interior Ministry to Kyiv from all regions of the country. It was exactly when the name Berkut becomes synonymous with police brutality. The events of November 30th proved to be a turning point in the Ukrainian protests, shifting the focus from pro-European sentiments to anti-government favor and giving them a sense of mass solidarity. The following day, December 1st, hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets of Kyiv to express their support for the protesters and demand accountability for those responsible for the brutal crackdown on the rally. On January 16, 2014, the Verkhovna Rada, that is Ukrainian parliament, passed the so-called dictatorship laws. When adopting the laws, the parliament violated a number of its own procedural rules. Ex-President Yanukovych signed these documents the next day on January 17th. This decision marked his final attempt to cling to power and silence the voice of Maidan. During the Revolution of Dignity, more than 100 activists were killed. They were the first victims of Ukraine's war for European values, and, as it turned out later, against Russia.
Молодшому з них, Назарію Войтовичу.
The youngest of them, Nazary Voitovich, was 17. The oldest, Ivan Nakonyechny, was 82. All of them together are a symbol of how different people from different regions of Ukraine selflessly and courageously defend common values. They all gave their lives for independence. All of them together are the heroes of the Heavenly 100. Today, Ukraine honors the memory of their feat, the memory of how Ukrainians can fight for their freedom in the squares, on the barricades, and today at the front. The memory that in the most difficult moments of history, we never give up. We stand for each other for the sake of each other.
On February 21st, 2014, an already former President Viktor Yanukovych takes his flight to Kharkiv accompanied by security and then flees to Russia via Crimea. The next day, on February 22, he was impeached as president. Criminal cases were filed against him in Ukraine not only for usurpation of power and state treason, but also for murder. What a spectacular end of a president's career, isn't it? Already in a month, the Russian invaders plan to hold illegal presidential elections in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. If you can call that election, after all, when you first invade a country, murder people, then make the families vote. The Russians want to create the illusion of legitimacy of the occupied territories and make the local population believe in propaganda narrative that Russia is here forever. It is obvious that these pseudo-elections, as well as the past attempts of the occupiers to hold any referendums, so-called referendums, violate the norms of international law and human rights in the temporarily occupied territories, TOT, of Ukraine. The conclusion of the Venice Commission 2019 on the legal nullity of the election to the Russian State Duma, which took place in the temporarily occupied territories in 2016, demonstrated the international community's strong condemnation of Russia's illegal and criminal actions.
As with the regional elections, it is almost certain that presidential elections voting in the Russian-controlled regions will be neither free nor fair. The Russian authorities almost certainly see achieving the correct results in these regions as a priority because they want to give the perception of legitimacy to Russia's invasion. UK Defense Intelligence Report.
Well, this farce, I can't call it anything else, the Kremlin wants us to call elections, violates all of it, you name it, the UN Charter, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine and other countries, just by the way, logic and morals. For any reason you still think the Kremlin never had one. Obviously, no elected body or elected office of the aggressor's Russian Federation can be recognized as legitimate. The Russian occupiers use all possible methods of pressure on the local population to encourage them to participate in these illegal elections on the barrel of the gun. The Russian authorities use forced passporting of TOT residents, threatening them and their family members, depriving of employment, medical and social assistance. We heard about forced passporting of minors, refusal which costs them a ban for further education. The Russian practice of mobile voting stations is the most cruel and life-threatening for the population of the TOT. The occupiers formed hundreds of such stations which are used in yards, crowded places and even private apartments. Ballot boxes were placed on benches near entrances, public transport stops, on car hoods and in markets. Together with the so-called workers of the polling stations, there were also armed security forces, allegedly for the protection of mobile groups, but however, obviously, it is known about repeated cases of not only psychological but also simply physical pressure on Ukrainian people. For example, in the village of Ulyanovka, Kherson region, local residents were forced to vote at gunpoint during a pseudo-referendum held in September 2023. For 3 members of election commissions, so-called ones, the occupation authorities assigned 6 to 8 Russian security forces with assault rifles. Well, they entered every house and pointed with a gunpoint, obviously, where to put a mark. It is obvious that in such conditions there can be no question of any democratic expression of will. Any attempts by the local population to oppose the occupiers have been met with the usual Russian hospitality, that means threats and weapons. The number of people who ended up in Russian torture chambers are unknown. It is obvious that the illegal elections of the president of the Russian Federation, who is Putin, which will take place in a month, will also be accompanied by pressure on the local population, threats and intimidation. More threats and more intimidation, violation of the realization of the manifestation of will. Such a flagrant violation of the norms of international law and human rights should not remain unpunished for the Russian Federation. How to do that? More sanctions. And the beginning of the procedure of Russia's exclusion from the UN Security Council, finally, because I hope it's not only me who thinks that a terrorist voting in an anti-terrorist council, it is an absurd taking on a new high. On February 19th, the Ukrainian-Japanese Conference on Economic Development and Reconstruction started in Tokyo. Japan indeed is a reliable partner of Ukraine which actively helps Ukrainians to address the consequences of the Russian aggression. As part of the conference, Ukraine and Japan have already signed 56 memorandums of cooperation in various fields between the public and private sectors of the two countries.
Agreements reached during the conference, signed agreements and contracts will accelerate our bilateral cooperation and will give a push to Ukrainian recovery. Ukraine is in a great need of Japan's technology, innovation and experience in the field of post-war and post-disaster recovery.
A total of 56 documents were signed by Prime Minister of Ukraine Denis Shmyhal and Prime Minister of Japan Fumio Kishida. The documents include intergovernmental agreements, memorandums and arrangements between businesses and local authorities. In particular, an intergovernmental convention on the avoidance of double taxation was signed, which is extremely important for Japanese companies planning new projects in Ukraine, and there will be a lot of such. More than a dozen agreements have been reached with major Japanese organizations to support Ukraine's reconstructions. JICA, JETRO, NEXI, Export Credit Agency and Japan Bank for International Cooperations are amongst these. grant agreements have been signed for the implementation of recovery programs, as well as a number of documents between the Ministry of Agrarian Policy and Food of Ukraine and Japanese companies for the supply of various agricultural machinery and equipment to Ukraine. Well, in easy terms for you, on a joint communiqué, the heads of the governments of two countries confirmed that the strengthening of the sanctions is a decisive and effective measure to contain the military potential of the Russian Federation. And the cherry on the top for all of us, I believe, the Japanese government will open an office of the Japan Foreign Trade Organization in Kiev to strengthen business ties between the two countries. Well, domo arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you so very much for watching. It was Henry Keane on UATV Studio, bringing the hard truth in easy terms, and I hope you like what we do for you. So if you really do, help us. Please like, please share, and please subscribe. Help us to deliver Ukrainian voice worldwide and to make it be heard. Let us know what you think in the comments below. We appreciate that. Really, stay safe and tune for more. See you tomorrow, folks.